Welcome back everybody, DestinysJesus here. In this video I'm breaking down how to W key like WOLFIEZ. He recently came back from tendonitis in his wrist, which basically stopped him playing for a long time, and some of his placements kind of fell off slightly, but since then he's actually recovered drastically. He's made it to the heats of FNCS, he performed really well during the qualifying weeks and during all the recent cash cups, and recently, which is what we've been looking at here, he got second place in the solo cash cup, pretty much just mainly W king, obviously some end games as well, but we're mostly going to be focusing on his W king abilities, and this will be really useful for any of you guys who play controller, or whether you're keyboard as well. There's a bunch of things that you can take away. I hope you guys enjoy, and make sure to like if you did. First thing we're looking at is just a useful thing that you guys need to be looking out for. Whenever you're fighting in the building, always look for your opponent's guns clipping through walls. So right here you can see the guy's gun actually clips through the wall. That basically just tells WOLFIEZ in here, and this is really good movement. The best thing I'd recommend doing for movement, obviously if you're on controller, is getting good at utilizing the double movement. This is something that they covered in the Solos Masterclass. Basically, always try to make sure you're abusing double movement and go completely sideways. And if you're keyboard, using a software like routing with 60 degrees angles means that you have no input delay on actually stopping your angles. So you can do plays like this where you sprint in, change directions a bunch of times, and catch the guy off guard and get a freedom like WOLFIEZ did right there. This is a really nice simple high ground take by WOLFIEZ here that I think you guys should be using. Basically just goes out to the side, hits the triple edit through, and as soon as he does this, he does a 90-degree turn to the right and gets these high walls up to his side, which allows him to take height. Those high walls are really crucial, blocks off the other person, and now he's on the same level as the other guy where he can initiate a box fight. Evaluates what gun the other player has who's only got attacks. This most of the time would be a good trade if he hits his shot. The opponent does a nice right hand peek, but WOLFIEZ doesn't really get phased by the fact that he's been taking a little bit of damage. He knows he has that gold pump and he can hit a one pump. So instead what he does is takes the wall, does a top right edit, doesn't jump, which is the crucial thing here, instead swings the whole way over to the left hand side and sets up a right and peek back to get the 200 pump as well. So right here's a really nice box fighting set up by WOLFIEZ on this other player. The other player made the mistake of setting up in one box, which is really easy to capitalize on. So he gets a tag to initiate the fight, comes down to the open angle right here, pressures this left hand side wall, again pressures the left hand side wall, and then he pulls out his pickaxe. At this point, it's quite likely the opponent still thinks he's going to continue to pressure the left hand side wall, but WOLFIEZ does the correct thing, swings over to the right, gets the critical hit on the right wall, so he breaks it immediately, which oftentimes catches other players off. Then he slides a cone and gets a nice chip tag like that, and then the opponent forces and makes the mistake of coming out towards WOLFIEZ. Gets the full box, goes to break out again with the pickaxe. Now at this point, a lot of other players will just try to pickaxe his wall and replace it, but WOLFIEZ realizes he's got the HP advantage, he's already cracked him, so he can simply shotgun through the wall and immediately kill him with AR. Really simple stuff, but gets the Elim really quickly and is able to continue fighting versus this other player here. Gets the full box, gets the cone, and then gets the Elim as well. Biggest thing with solo cash cup fights is you usually try to ending them quickly and safely without taking too much risk. So if you know you've got the opponent cracked and you're confident hitting an AR shot as you jump into the box, it is perfectly fine to use your shotgun to bust down the wall and get in. So in this next fight, WOLFIEZ's been fighting this guy on Edge of Storm for a while here. So you can see there's the correct thing actually going for piece control. It takes a little bit of full damage doing it, but he drops down below the guy's double box setup, gets two cones in, which is so crucial, and then immediately starts pressuring the wall from the side. So you can see here he gets a chip tag, it's the guy trying to edit out, starts pressuring through, and this is a mistake I see a lot of players making. When the wall is 1 HP, and obviously he has that piece control in the center, you could obviously go up, go for wall replace, then go for a pump shot, but a lot of times you're going to get traded there, you're going to take too much damage. So what WOLFIEZ does here is perfectly correct. I think you guys do a lot more. It's just sprays through the 1 HP wall, gets a load of damage on the guy and reclaims high ground, prevents him from going up, and then from there is a really simple job of just hunting him down and actually chasing him and getting the Elim here in a second. Biggest thing to take away here is the fact that you just need to be aware of the fact you can use the AR to actually get damage in during the fight, especially if your opponent is always going for edit shots like this other player was. So right there, WOLFIEZ opens the fight with a bow shot. I've talked about this, how it is important to actually make sure that you always get a damage advantage before the fight starts, where the other guy's on the back foot, where he's boxed up. And then from here, he basically plays it perfectly. He knows there's a high chance of getting third party at the other side of Sweaty, so she takes his time, sets up the wall, covers all his angles just in case of that third party, and it's actually quite a unique play. Here he's got the wall within 2 shots of breaking. He knows the guy's only got big shields since that's the first hill he tried to pop, so he's going to try to catch him off guard while he's popping these big shields. Instead of building anything, he just jumps straight down, sprays through and gets a white tag, and then it's actually really unique usage of the makeshift. The makeshift obviously isn't the best damage, but the high fire allows you to do plays just like this. So he jumps down, edits through, breaks the wall once in the makeshift, breaks it again to get the cone and the wall up top. You can see he gets the cone there through that wall. Now he comes around from the top, edits through, commits him with the makeshift and the AR again, and then gets a nice easy Elim. This is a big mistake I see a lot of players making when they go to third party engagement, is not trying to open it with an AR beam. A lot of times if you shoot your AR at the perfect time from height or from an angle, like WOLFIEZ can do here in a second, you can easily get the elim. A lot of players make the mistake of just pushing in straight away with a shotgun, trying to catch one off guard with a one pump or something, and then it just turns into a messy three-way fight. So WOLFIEZ actually just sits up top perfectly, gets the elim on James Grower right there, and now he knows at this point the other player's probably low HP because they were aim battling, and he also knows the fact that he got all the sniper mats, so he's going to be making a lot of room and a lot of boxes. WOLFIEZ doesn't want to waste his time, especially with Storm, so instead he decides to just commit in with the AR, Bloom fight straight away, doesn't miss it, so he instead decides to go around from the left hand side, knowing the guy can't rebox towards his mountain or come forward because of the taxi, so instead he jumps out to the side and then wins the aim duel with the makeshift with the high fire rate. Again, the makeshift can work versus pumps if they're low HP and you get that damage advantage straight away like you did in that fight. So in this next fight, WOLFIEZ actually gets caught off and has to play on the defensive. I talked about this in the Muzz video recently, where if you get tagged down to low HP, like 50 HP WOLFIEZ is here, you need to make a lot of room, you need to make a lot of boxes and play from the defensive. You never want to die with mats in a cash cup, and the fact he made all these boxes means that he's allowed to get 2 minis off, so he's in pretty even health for this guy if he was able to get a counter shot, and he has all this edit control. Other players made the mistake of coming through all of these edits that WOLFIEZ has done earlier, and now he's in all of the edit control. So WOLFIEZ could go from above, you can edit this way, you can go from any of the sidewalls, which is what he opts to do. Edits out to the side, goes from the side, could have easily got 100 tagged here and the fight would be even, but instead he keeps on making space, tries to get the big off to see if the guy would continue pressuring, which he does. So instead now he goes for a height take, gets a nice 100 tag right there, and at this point you might just go for a big, which would kind of be a mistake. Then you'd let the other person get to the same HP as you, and you'd lose that one pump potential since the guy's cracked 100. WOLFIEZ does the correct thing, actually keeps on pressuring, keeps on trying to jump onto the guy's walls, knows he's only got attack, which is for 80 body shot. This is a perfectly fine trade to do, and wins the fight really cleanly. This next fight is a textbook example of closing out an engagement quickly when you have the upper hand. So you can see here WOLFIEZ positions himself really well ahead of this guy on rotate. The guy turns the other way to actually farm a tree, expecting WOLFIEZ to build away, gets that 100 tag, and look what he does. Pressures with a harpoon from that 40 meter range onto the front wall. The guy makes the mistake of actually placing a ramp in his box rather than making space, so WOLFIEZ harpoons the side wall, sets up a ramp immediately, pickaxes straight in, and then commits in with the aim duel right there. Really simple stuff that you can go ahead and do. It's just after you get that AR beam, just pressure multiple times from a long distance away, close the gap as quickly as possible. The guy only got 1 mini off in that time because of how good WOLFIEZ's pressure was with the harpoon, and then just commit straight in with the aim duel and win the fight quickly. So let's take a quick break from all the W King that WOLFIEZ is doing so far, and actually have a look at an endgame that you guys can learn a bunch of different things from. So obviously endgames is where you get the majority of points. Even though WOLFIEZ had an insane amount of elims in this tourney, the endgame is where he got the majority of his points just from the placement and how consistent he was in this tourney and actually getting some pop-off kills and clutches during the endgame. Right here, this is a really good example of first moving rotate. It's pulling straight at the dam. One thing I'd really recommend for moving zones is try to find an edge that works for you. You can see here WOLFIEZ is sticking to the right hand side edge of Storm, gets the whole way up, recycling all other players' builds, hits a nice shot on this guy as he runs past to get a nice little refresh, gets the harpoon off him, and then he's able to continue rotating up the moving zone. Important thing with this is the fact he's not going last second, he's still got a little bit of timing on the zone behind him in case he gets pressured a little bit, and he's just doing really nice simple wood builds so he can save his hard metal for endgame when he's getting pressured and actually focused by other players. So this is a concept that I haven't really talked about in any of my YouTube videos. I've covered it slightly in the trios and solos masterclasses. If you guys have those, you might already know about it, and just how the dead side of zone can be created by the terrain. If you think of this in terms of early or mid game, if there's a team based up on a massive hill such as Zate Hill, a lot of other players aren't going to be rotating into that position because of the fact there's already a team there that's going to be going for AR shots or bow shots. They're just going to avoid the area, so that creates a mini dead side. Especially if you're doing this on edge of first or second zone, a lot of times you can just create a whole dead side for yourself just by being positioned in that area. I think Rich Homie Quinn talked about it in one of his videos he did on my course. You can also apply this concept to endgames. Right here, a lot of players aren't going to be rotating into bad terrain, like up a hill or even across a river. A lot of players aren't going to be doing that, so they're not even going to be looking over there. So WOLFIEZ gets completely free rotate on this hill elevation. Nobody's going to be rotating up here, and he has to think that rotate on the right hand side of the zone he was doing earlier was completely free. So he gets a whole really free rotate along this right hand side. Nobody's looking in the open space, so he gets into a completely backside position here. And the good thing with this, because of how far he went up to the north hand side when it pulled north, means that he's on the dead side. I call this the anti-jam strat, where you go to the dead side of moving zones, which is basically the north hand side, like up this way. If it was to pull from down south, this would be the dead side, and that allows WOLFIEZ to keep getting these rotates along really cheaply. So you can see here, gets in position to use that harpoon that you picked up earlier, keeps rotating forward here in a second since it pulls towards him. Obviously nobody's going to be looking at this front side position of zone here as it pulls towards him, so he just gets another really cheap rotate, and you can see how excited he gets over actually realizing how moving zones understand.
I'm a boomer or something now.
So right here, WOLFIEZ is actually in Storm in this back end position. He's in the end of second moving, which is kind of the perfect time to play floppers, and now it's going to third moving. And the one thing I'd recommend doing when you're playing floppers is to always make sure you play one full flopper in Storm. This basically means that you catch other players off guard. They kind of forget about the possibility of flopper plays. So WOLFIEZ does this perfectly here. Plays this one full flopper in Storm, then runs forward and wins this angel. Gets into position where he wins his next angel on this other player just by coming straight through. And as soon as he gets those 2 refreshes, he just hard overbuilds and gets into a position where he can heal up and not take any risks. Gets in Storm, pops a mini, catches another player who's 1 HP on backside of his own just like so. And then from there he's in a 1v1 position. I really don't think this 1v1 is winnable unless he was to get minis off and kind of even out the HP disadvantage that he has after that initial chip tag. Instead he just goes for some builds, tries to go for a shot on this other player. It gets some chip damage, but it's not enough to crack the guy, and the guy has the dub. So he simply just goes front side of Storm, and WOLFIEZ is 1 HP on backside. Still a really impressive game with a load of good fundamentals in terms of moving zone that you guys can learn from for sure. In his next spawn fight, WOLFIEZ gets the damage advantage immediately. He knows because of how early this fight is, and the fact that the other player's got a good pump, there's no reason to commit in straight away. He's got height, and he's got the mat advantage because of the guy's fact is reboxing several times. So instead, he does the correct thing of just going up on height and just continuously pressuring with his AR from above. Always try to think of the fact that you can just pressure something and win the fight just by AR pressure, especially in an early in-game engagement like this. Later on during the mid-game where people have like 500 metal, this won't really work, but during the initial off-spawn fight where you have height and you have the mat advantage, which are the 2 most crucial things, as well as the shield advantage, you can easily win a fight just like so. Jumps in to get full piece control with that little bit of damage, does a 1 motion reset to actually get the wall, gets the crack, and then from here just commits into the AR. Really good stuff. The guy was completely panicked and ran out of mats at that point. He was just trying to be desperately get to the house. And WOLFIEZ says to himself, just use your brain in a fight. Get that advantage where you can actually position yourself better than the opponent and outmat them to easily win the engagement. This is a really nice example of just realizing when you can go for piece control on your opponent. WOLFIEZ is forcing him cones from below, forcing this guy into reboxing, and he kind of panics and actually makes a mistake of rushing and not boxing it properly. So WOLFIEZ comes from above here, the correct thing to do, drops down, gets the wall, and immediately forces in a ramp. A lot of players wouldn't force in the ramp here, instead they'd go for a cone, but the ramp is nice because it bumps the guy's cross set up, messes up his shot here, so WOLFIEZ wins the angel, and instead of going in crazy and trying to get this wall here and go with some edit course in the guy, instead he very simply just opens a nice wide edit, slides a cone and waits for the guy to make the mistake of running out towards WOLFIEZ, which he does and he reads perfectly.